immense competition from around the world, right? India, China, Vietnam, Mexico. And we want to maintain a great level of payment to our folks who are working in our manufacturing industries. And is it fair to say that the best way we do that is to make sure that our manufacturing base is the most educated, the smartest, most productive base in the world? And if you look at what we're doing here in America, as opposed to, you brought up Germany in the past and other industrialized nations that have good paying jobs, how are they doing it different than we are? How are they more successful than we are in marrying up a skilled labor force to the jobs market? And I'll throw that to anyone on the panel.
Well, I think Germany does have a system, a strong apprenticeship system, a strong system of technical education that is more industry-oriented. A couple of other issues. I think, frankly, students coming out of the equivalent of their K through 12 system probably come out on average with stronger basic skills, and you do need a solid base of basic reading and writing skills to be able to handle some of this more technical training. So I think that's where, especially if you look at, say, the bottom quartile of our students, they often don't have that base of solid. And again, I'm not talking about Algebra 2. Too many states have worried about Algebra 2. The issue isn't Algebra 2. It's solid basics of reading, writing, and communicating. So I think that's one area where we fall behind. But secondly, some of these places like Germany aren't scared of having a strong technical system at the secondary and post-secondary level, strong apprenticeship system, and they're not so narrowly focusing on higher ed the way we do here.
Yeah. Do you guys agree with that? The rest of the panel would, yeah.
Well, I would also like to say that we have many regulations here that they do not have in some of these other countries. And if we look at where manufacturing is increasing in China, if Boeing had moved its plant to China, then the NLRB wouldn't have been able to go and close it down. They are drilling for oil right over our side of the line off the coast of Florida. There's a Sino-Cuban oil drilling operation. They are importing our coal. We exported about 80 million tons of coal last year. China is buying our coal, they're buying our corn, and they don't have many of these regulations that our manufacturers have to comply with. We need to think about making our country the most business-friendly place to operate.
And to that point, there was a recent study that came out from the National Association of Manufacturers that indicate that it's 18% more expensive to manufacture in America, even after you take out the labor costs. And I think that goes to your point that our regulation side is so much higher than other parts of the world. And that doesn't mean we don't want to have clean air and clean water, but when it's so much greater than other countries, it creates a drag. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And Boeing, for example, is going to have to go through 2 years of litigation and then to find out whether it will be able to keep its plant in South Carolina. The Kauffman Foundation just brought out a 400-page volume called Rules for Growth, showing different ways that litigation is reducing our GDP growth, the ways that can be changed relatively costlessly to enable us to create more high-growth companies.
And I think you made the point earlier, where if Boeing was going to leave Washington State and go to China,
yeah,
the NLRB can't do anything about it.
Exactly, and it wouldn't be involved in 2 years of litigation costing millions of dollars.
But they moved to one of the other 49 states, and here they're tied up in 2 years of litigation. And I find it interesting that we don't see businesses leaving right-to-work states like Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Texas and going to our heavily unionized states. We actually see the reverse happening. We see, the heavily unionized states seeing a loss of their manufacturing base going to right-to-work states because it seems to be more competitive. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's a fact. The 2010 census showed the movement of Americans also, not just jobs, but Americans following jobs from the unionized states to the right-to-work states. That's why right-to-work states are going to be picking up more congressional seats.
I have to disagree. Let's be honest. We have the private sector workforce rate of unionization in the United States now is 7%. To argue that somehow it has dropped from 35% back in the 1950s. So somehow to argue that the 7% unionization rate is responsible for declining manufacturing employment. Frankly, if you compare it to Germany, we've all agreed that Germany has been much more successful at maintaining its manufacturing base. The rate of unionization there is much higher. Many of the regulations protecting workers in Germany are higher than here. So I think sometimes we're whipping a horse that's already dead, not completely dead, but that has shrunk dramatically in size. And I think if you look at the pressures American manufacturing is under compared to the trends in unionization, they move in fairly opposite directions.
Can I just have 30 more seconds? If you look at the facts, though, we're seeing our manufacturing base leave the Michigans, New Yorks, Ohio's, and Pennsylvanias, and truly are going to right-to-work states. If it's not the union issue, what do you attribute that to?
I think those manufacturers may prefer, yes, so we're having a shell game, and when you set up a situation like that, sure, they would prefer the lower costs. But when you do a fair analysis across countries, we've all lauded the wonderful German system. Germany has higher rates of unionization than the United States and does not have particularly lower regulations. So I think, frankly, we can talk about the Boeing case. That's a tiny part. That's one case. We've lost millions and millions of manufacturing jobs, and I don't think we can attribute that nationwide, not a shifting from Michigan to South Carolina, nationwide, and I simply don't think we can blame that on unionization.
But is it one case that has a truly chilling effect on the whole manufacturing industry as a whole, as a test case that manufacturers have to consider where they set up shop because of this new rule?
Again, I would argue when you look at the long decline in manufacturing in the United States, at a time when unionism has been declining, you simply can't explain the decline in manufacturing employment with the trends in unionization. It simply doesn't work.
But it is a bit like handing a man who's drowning a 100-pound weight. It certainly isn't helping the process. And I think the issues of regulatory predictability, if anything else, are really the key for manufacturing. Manufacturers are resilient. We can figure out how to get it done. But we need to know what the landscape's going to be. With it constantly shifting, that's why people have hesitancy to invest in growth here.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thanks, Congressman. Sometimes it's good to let the time go by a little bit. That was a good debate. And I would put myself on Dr. Holzer's side.